So Dark Souls is a thing, and it's hard. Like, really hard. Dark Souls, like a lot of games from Software, is difficult and punishing, but fans of the series are almost fanatical about their experience with these games. There is something unique in the approach to game development that From Software has tapped into. The gameplay is unforgiving, but not unfair. Usually. The games are generally well balanced, and all of the slow delay to attacks or the time it takes to roll out of the way, the placement of enemies, and the terrible platforming mechanics are all purposefully done to make the game feel treacherous. Players start learning every stone and patch of dirt in every castle and swamp in From Software's games because around every corner lurks death. Like, not just could mean death, I mean like literally the cloaked hood scythe looking guy. That's very much the darker art style utilized in these games, especially Bloodborne. You wouldn't remember locations very well if all you had to do was mindlessly hack your way through them. The art style too reflects this dark and dangerous atmosphere. Enemies are often grotesque and otherworldly and sometimes super eldritch, especially in Bloodborne, and bosses are often 3 to 5 times larger than your player character, and most times they don't even fit on screen. Lore and story are also just as opaque and obtuse. Characters talk in what seems like nonsense and sometimes answer your questions with what seems like riddles. Items have paragraph upon paragraph of text, so the story is there, but it's just as stubborn as the gameplay. Like a puzzle for people who enjoy feeling dumb. You have to work for it, and it's hard. Like, really hard. And this immovable and intransigent and at times seemingly insurmountable challenge really resonates with some people. There are entire YouTube channels devoted to unlocking and solving the mysteries of what the actual fuck is going on in these games. Communities have been built up with their own memes, inside jokes, and subculture on message boards and threads all over the internet. Fans gather communally, praise the sun, and share their experiences, passing along their wisdom to newcomers in that most beautiful and ancient of sayings, "Get good." And upon hearing these words, newcomers and diehards come together and strive for even greater heights of masochistic gameplay and lore. It is truly a community made of only the finest gamers. And I'm not one of them. What? They're hard games, man. Like, really fucking hard, and I'm not about that. Of course, there are a lot of reasons to play games. Some people like to play puzzle games or quote-unquote walking simulators. Some people want to relax and unwind. Some people, like me, want to be told a good story with good character development. But I have mad respect for people who play Dark Souls and other games from Software. But the difficulty is a factor of why I cannot get into them. I'm not saying that Dark Souls or other games from Software need an easy mode, but I'm also not saying that. I simply think that there is a reason this discussion comes up, and it has to do with difficulty, learning curves, and the state of flow in gaming. And so today, I want to talk about Dark Souls and the other Soulsborne games. In 2009, From Software developed a game called Demon Souls, which was originally a spiritual successor to From Software's series called Kingsfield. The game was floundering in development, and so From Software placed Hidetaka Miyazaki in charge. Under his direction and supervision, Demon Souls was created, and although it did not achieve any degree of success at the time, it did garner a bit of a fan base and has since become a cult classic. Following this style of gameplay 2 years later, Miyazaki created Dark Souls. It has been cited as one of the hardest games, if not the hardest game of all time. Although it was not a direct sequel to Demon Souls, the two games are the beginning of what has been called the Souls series. This series was rounded out by Dark Souls 2 in 2014 and a third game in 2016. In between these releases, there was also a very similar game, also directed by Miyazaki, called Bloodborne, and although it is not part of the same series in terms of lore, it is often grouped with the series, creating the portmanteau known as Soulsborne. So normally in this point of the show, I would give a quick recap of the plot, but as the whole Soulsborne thing has 3 separate stories, each entrenched in their own obscurely hidden worlds that would be painstaking to find and discover, and the fact that the point of a synopsis is often rooted in its own brevity, I'm not gonna do that, and you can look that shit up on your own time or watch a video. Dark Souls hinges around reigniting the first flame because it's gone out, and that's bad. But don't stop to ask for help lighting it again because everyone wants to murder you. Bloodborne is about being a hunter in some place called Yharnam, which really has the most terrible city planner of all time. Like, I can't even find the fucking travel center, and every time you stop to ask for directions, people want to murder you. And then Demon Souls is about a demon, or demons, souls, but I can only assume everyone wants to murder you. The plot really isn't the point of Dark Souls, or rather, for some people it's the only point, but me telling you what it is would defeat the purpose of this intricately woven world in terms of flavor text and environmental storytelling that is expertly crafted. Some people get way into that and live for that excitement, but for other people, the only forward momentum they need to play a game like this is game hard. And I mean like really fucking brutally hard. Of course, as I mentioned, the point of the game on all levels is to be hard. It provides a challenge to the player. People want to climb mountains simply because they are there. If you give someone a challenge, they will attempt to overcome it simply because of the desire to do so. And bragging rights. So much bragging rights about how good you are. We get it, you're a Dark Souls fan. You want a medal or your humanity restored? I don't actually have a problem with Soulsborne games or its players. It's endlessly entertaining to watch other people play, and the lore is interesting, but there is a certain amount of prestige that those who play these kinds of games bestow upon themselves, and this stems from the difficulty of the games. I do not think that Dark Souls needs an easy mode, but I don't think that it would hurt if the game had one. You could easily make an easy mode option that must be manually turned on and give a developer message saying this is not how we intended the game to be played, because then you give your audience the ability to choose how they want to play. The reason I think this is important has to do with the accessibility of a game in terms of introducing the game to new players, and the fact that different kinds of gamers enjoy games for different reasons. There will always be those who will never like this kind of adventure-based role-playing game, and that's fine. But I love these kinds of games, and yet I could never get into Dark Souls. I've made a few attempts over the years to play the first Dark Souls and Bloodborne, but I've never found a way in, and I'm going to attempt to explain why I, and probably others, feel this way about Soulsborne games, and I'm going to do it using science! Or, psychology, which is close enough. When we talk about the learning curve of a game, we refer to the amount of time that must be spent learning the game's mechanics in order to make any kind of discernible progress. The problem with this is we often refer to the game's learning curve rather than the threshold or level of a patience a player has in order to jump that learning curve. This learning curve provides the first hurdle you need to overcome in order to get into Dark Souls. Once you understand the mechanics of the Soulsborne series, you can make them work for you. The difficulty increases, but you learn and master skills, and your character also levels up. Avatar strength and player skill help you progress, or in other words, get good. Some of the frustrating parts of games come in the form of difficulty spikes, which is the same idea as a learning curve but appears in the middle of the adventure, and this can feel like hitting a brick wall. It may require grinding or learning game mechanics or a different way of playing, but this spike can lead players to leave the game altogether, and so a good game should have the right level of learning curve and difficulty level that ramps up in a level manner. But this is again all on the shoulders of the game and developers behind the game. I want to make it more obvious that video games are art, and therefore subjective. Because the interaction between art and gamer is individual, each player is different and has a different level of frustration that they are willing to tolerate. When working towards something that you are passionate about or that captures your interest, you may find yourself lost in the process of creating or doing whatever that activity is. Your attention to the passage of time and your perception to the outside world dwindles as you focus on the task at hand. You are in the zone. This could be anything from writing an essay, playing music, or cycling, to playing Tetris. This almost transcendental feeling is called flow. This term was coined by psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. Okay, I had a professor point out how to say it to me when I was in my master's. According to Csikszentmihalyi, the state of flow is dependent on 8 things. The task is completable, the environment allows you to focus on the task has clear goals, the task provides immediate feedback, there is a deep but seemingly effortless interaction that removes the awareness of the mundane. There is a sense of control over actions, the concern for oneself disappears, and the perception of the passage of time is altered. Flow is achieved when all of these conditions are met. Csikszentmihalyi is quick to note that the task at hand does not need to be a physical or a creative activity, and the skills do not have to be physical in nature, which means we can apply this flow state to gamers and gaming. And I'm not the first person to do this at all, but I am interested in the state of flow in regards to difficulty. So looking at each stipulation on the list, we can see why flow is important to gaming and why difficulty in the form of a learning curve and difficulty spikes might interfere with achieving this state. Number 1, of course, we know that the challenge we face is doable. Dark Souls is designed to be played and completed. Number 2 has more to do with the environment we find ourselves in when we play, what distractions are around us, but this can also be about HUD and game feel. A cluttered HUD or too much camera shake might create a distraction from gameplay. The task has clear goals. There is certainly a shorthand in gaming that should make anyone familiar with role-playing games familiar with the goals of Dark Souls, so I think the task could be called clear: beat the monster, move on, and defeat the next bigger, more powerful monster. The task provides immediate feedback. Yeah, that's pretty immediate feedback. There is a deep but seemingly effortless interaction that changes the perception of self. Well, that has a lot to do with the player. We'll come back to this one. There is a sense of control over actions. Certainly, there are clear controls and the game is designed well. Controls cause action that are made to feel a specific way intentionally, but here the most important word is the sense of control over actions. We'll come back to this as well. The concern for self disappears and the perception of time is altered. Both of these are dependent on the person playing, not the task. Dark Souls provides a task that can give its player the opportunity to achieve the state of flow, but the personal sense that each player has is individual and subjective. Dark Souls doesn't suffer from a deficit of any of the points on the list for achieving flow, but the effortlessness that is required is hard to achieve. Not that there is not an exertion on the part of the participant. Indeed, Csikszentmihalyi notes that flow leads to a stronger sense of self and accomplishment, but that the task itself does not need to be one of joy per se. This means the task can be very difficult, but the effortlessness is in the interaction between the game and the player. Point 5 is this effortless interaction, and here is where I think the learning curve or difficulty spike from Software's games becomes a problem for anyone wanting to achieve the state of flow. This is affected by point 6, the sense of control over actions, point 4, the feedback received, and lastly point 1, a task that is completable. Although the controls and movements in Soulsborne games are intentional, the sense of control may be lost because of the time it takes between players' input and the avatar's execution of the task. In gaming terms, we would parse out the number of frames on a wind-up or cooldown of a movement. Soulsborne games are entirely dependent on knowing how much each input takes to complete and reprimands its players who do not grasp this. Again, this is not a bad thing, it is a design choice and an intentional one the game and designers make, and it works well. But it also means that players who do not understand this are punished. The game doesn't tell you that you need to be aware strategically of how much time a move takes or stamina that it will use. The game never tells you that your dodge only keeps you invincible for a few frames, or where those frames are. So point 4, feedback. The only feedback you are given is when you live after an encounter, or when you die. So you die. A lot. And the game never tells you what you have done right or wrong. It leaves this up to the player. You can try a different strategy or a gameplay style or even a different build or weapon. This is a great amount of freedom given to the player, but only if you already know what it is you're doing that's wrong. Because even if you know what you're doing in Dark Souls, you still die a lot. Unless you're one of those people who can do a Dark Souls run while taking no damage and you're playing on a Guitar Hero controller. Oh yeah, look that up, it's real. There's nothing wrong with dying a lot in games, and it probably won't even affect your state of flow, as it's a kind of feedback. Many roguelikes and roguelites have deaths and fails built into the gameplay loop as part of the feedback that works to the advantage of achieving this flow state. This is how you get that just one more time mentality. But this does lead us to the first point, which is you are facing a task that is completable or has a chance of being completed. For most players unused to a From Software game and its difficulty, seeing that death screen over and over again, especially when the game has given you very little to go on and all you've done is fight a few shifty looking skeleton fucks and then it drops a fat looking bulbous grey demon looking thing at you with a huge freaking health bar and you seem to barely be able to put a dent in it, that this first point becomes tenuous. It's not as though I don't think it's doable, and it's not as though I'm dumb and cannot figure out better strategies or how the timing of my moves or the enemy's move work. Most Soulsborne players go into boss fights expecting to die the first few times, just to scout out the moveset and timing of their enemy. The issue is how long will it take for me to achieve the state of flow playing this game? How high is my tolerance for this game's lack of feedback? It's not necessarily that I think the task is insurmountable, but simply do I have the patience to figure this out when I could play another game that has a better difficulty to skill ratio in regards to learning curve or difficulty spike for me? And there is the key word, me. I don't think any of the Soulsborne games are bad, and I can assure you that people are able to find a state of flow when they play these kinds of games. Alyssa is one of my co-hosts on the Cinemasters podcast and the editor for This Is a Thing. She often plays Dark Souls for hours on end and achieves this flow state. You can catch her streaming Dark Souls at twitch.tv/AlyssaLou. But the reason I bring up the whole difficulty thing is because I think this get good mentality of Dark Souls actually betrays the underlying achievements of the Soulsborne series. And that is, find a gameplay style or strategy that works for you when you're up against punishing bosses and overwhelming odds. One of the biggest complaints I heard about Sekiro Shadows Die Twice, another game from Software directed by Miyazaki, was that the game did not allow for a lot of variation in gameplay style. The bosses were just as hard and the game was grueling in a lot of the same ways as the Soulsborne series that Miyazaki was known for, and goddamn if it wasn't visually astounding. But the game lacked the same variation in play styles. This means the player has fewer options of how to overcome the difficulties of the game. This may affect the level of control the player feels and leave them less likely to achieve that flow state. All I'm saying is that difficulty in Soulsborne games means some people find it harder to find that flow in order to get into the game, but that's personal to them. A difficulty setting doesn't even have to be how much damage you deal or take. It could just be a hint system that offers a bit of feedback to players. Railroading and hand-holding in games sucks, but no direction or information on how a game works can be just as damaging. All this is to say that I still think the Soulsborne games are cool, and I have a high degree of respect for the artistic direction and gameplay choices, including the difficulty. And I have a similar amount of respect for those who strive to beat them despite that difficulty. But it's not for everyone, and the difficulty is a factor in that. But maybe that's okay. It doesn't need to be for everyone. Games come in all shapes and sizes, and so do the people who enjoy them. I just wanted to give some insight on why difficulty in games may stop some people from achieving that flow state based on difficulty spikes and learning curves. And that is what I think about Dark Souls, and the whole Soulsborne series as a whole. I know a lot of people were bummed when Dark Souls finished with 3, but I think I prefer the look and atmosphere of Bloodborne. That shit was spooky, scary skeletons all over the place. Plus, everyone seems to have like legs that are half stilts or be like half werewolf scarecrow. Plus, I'm a sucker for steampunk anything, and that game has that rusty gears and flintlock aesthetic. I think I will try Bloodborne again. People say it's faster. I just hope it's not as hard. Like, really stupidly, brutally fucking hard. Hey, thanks so much for watching that video. If you enjoyed it, backstab that like button like you're slaying your greatest foe. I tried playing Bloodborne again, and I think I might stick with it. It really is hard. I want to hear your thoughts about difficulty or about getting good down in the comments. And don't forget to stick around for other episodes of This Is a Thing and lots of other cool things happening right here on Cinemaster's Ultimate Timeline.